Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Catalyze Yourself. I am Gayatri, and today we are stepping into the kind of chaos that does not come from the world outside. It comes from and lives inside of us. In our last conversation, episode 30, we talked about navigating the chaos of life that happens around us, the shifting deadlines, the unexpected turns life can take, the noise of a world that can leave you feel stretched and unsettled. But even when the outside world steadies, there is another kind of chaos that can keep us trapped. And that is the infinite loop our thoughts can move into. We know what this feels like. Lying awake at night, replaying a conversation again and again, worrying about what could go wrong before it has even begun. Rehashing the past in search of a different ending, or circling the same question, waiting for that perfect clarity that never arrives. And there's one point I have to make clear. Thought loops are not signs that we are broken or that we are weak. It is simply a nervous system pattern that we have been taught or we chose to learn that our nervous system now thinks is the default response or default path. They're our mind and nervous system doing what we've learned to do, trying to keep us safe, trying to create certainty, trying to prepare us for what feels unresolved. But instead of giving us peace, they leave us circling. And here's the hopeful part. Loops may be persistent, but they are not permanent. They can be shortened, they can be softened, and they can be broken. That's where we'll go today, into the loops we know way too well. And we look into why they hold us and how presence of mind helps us step out of them so we can return to clarity and choice. Thought loops rarely announce themselves, they just sneak in. And before we know it, they've taken hold of us. It's that replay button that gets stuck after a conversation. We go over every word, every tone, every possible way we could have said something differently. Hours later, nothing has changed, except we feel a little tired, we feel heavier. It is the constant rehearsal of what might go wrong. The meeting tomorrow, the difficult choice ahead, the moment of risk we cannot control. Our mind cycles through scenario after scenario as if predicting all the possibilities that will guarantee safety. Could be the late night what ifs. What if I'd taken that job? What if I hadn't said yes? What if I made the wrong call now? And instead of reflection that helps us grow, it starts moving into rumination that keeps us stuck. And sometimes loops can take the shape of waiting for someone else to validate our choice, someone else to affirm our worth, to make us feel certain before we act. We circle and circle because as long as the loop keeps spinning, we don't have to step forward. We've all felt this, and some loops last minutes, and others can have a hold on us for days. And while the content may be different for each of us, the feeling is the same. Our thoughts are circling, our emotions are rising with them, our body is tensing as if it's bracing for something that never comes. And recognizing the loop is not about judgment. It is about compassion. It is about clarity. It is about seeing clearly. This is not reflection. This isn't problem solving. This is a cycle that's holding me in place. And once we see that, we can now begin to break it. And if we have all lived thought loops, the question then becomes, why do they happen? Why do they hold us so tightly? Why is it so hard to step out of it, even when we know we are going round and round? Part of the answer is in the way our brain works. When we are not actively focused outward and intentionally operating with presence of mind, the brain slips into what neuroscience calls the default mode network. That is just a label to say our brain is just operating without effort. You can think of it as the mind's background mode. It is the job of this part of us to replay the past, to simulate and imagine the future, and weave stories about who we are. And when it is balanced, it is useful. It is how we truly reflect. It is how we learn and how we imagine possibilities. But when it is overactive, the reflection turns into rumination. The rehearsal turns into worry. The story turns into a loop we are not able to let go of. And here is where our own mind can make that loop stronger. Our cognition, the part that spins that thought, keeps replaying the scenario. Our emotion rises with it, adding fuel to the worry, fear, or regret. And our consciousness, the deeper awareness that can integrate it all, is absolutely drowned out in the noise. And our nervous system, the channel carrying all of these signs within our mind, gets flooded with the same cycle again and again. The nervous system left on its own will not see a thing wrong with this loop, because our nervous system likes safety, and even more, the idea of safety. And the loop feels safe because it is predictable. Even if it's uncomfortable, it's familiar. Our system would rather circle in what it knows than face the uncertainty of what it doesn't. And that is why we stay up late, rehashing the same argument or rehearsing the same fear, because some part of the body believes the loop is safer than the journey it would take to release or break out of it. And intellectually, we know this. Safety is not the same as steady repetition or predictability. A loop gives us the illusion of control. If I keep turning this over and over, I'll finally be ready. I'll finally be safe. A breakthrough is bound to happen. In reality, nothing is resolved. We just get better at repeating a pattern that does not serve us. This is also why loops feel so unshakable. Each time we circle, we reinforce that pathway. The mind and the nervous system learns. This is familiar. This is what we do here. This is our default. And yet, neuroscience reminds us that our brain and body are not static. We grow. Our brain has neuroplasticity. We can learn the same way. Repetition can deepen a groove within our neural pathways to make it stronger. New experiences, new practices can open up other routes. It doesn't mean change is instant, and it doesn't mean that loop will never arise again. It simply means our system is capable of learning another way to hold that movement. And with presence of mind, we can begin to teach it. Thought loops are not something that happens to just a few of us. They happen to all of us. They are part of being human. The mind replays, the mind rehearses, the mind circles, and mind searches for safety. All of us have lived them. Some of us find ourselves replaying conversations. Some of us get caught rehearsing worst case scenarios. Some of us return to that same worry until it becomes our background noise. And that loop, the thought loop, is not selective. It does visit every single one of us. What does differ is how it shows up, how long it shows up, and what the content of the loop itself is. And for some of us, especially if we have been living with what is diagnosed as ADHD, the loop could feel like unfinished tabs on a browser. And The mind just keeps reopening them, circling back to make sure nothing got missed. Even if the task itself isn't urgent, the loop insists, don't forget this, keep checking. It is the system trying to hold safety through repetition. Just an example of a potential scenario. Another potential scenario for others who fall within an autism spectrum. The loop can be tied to predictability. The world outside may feel overstimulating or confusing, and the loop becomes a way of creating order. Repeated thoughts keep our mind feeling safe because it is familiar, and familiarity feels safer than uncertainty. I'm giving you these examples so we can resonate with either what we have experienced or someone close to us could have experienced. And in the same token, for those of us who have lived with anxiety, the loop can become compulsive. A single thought can get tagged as a threat, and our brain can cycle it again and again in the hope that repetition will neutralize the danger. And instead of resolution, we just find ourselves stuck, held hostage by the very pattern that was meant to keep us safe. And for those of us carrying depression, this loop can take the form of rumination. A painful self-story is repeated as self-talk until it feels like the only story we have. And that loop tells us who we are, not accurately, not kindly, but relentlessly. And then there are ways loops appear to any one of us, regardless of diagnoses or labels. The argument we rehearse on the drive home, the what if we can stop spinning at 2 a.m., the moment we keep returning to, not because it's helpful, but because our nervous system has not been able to put it down. Loops are not the exception, and it does not happen only to those who have a label or a diagnosis. It can happen to anyone, and they are simply part of our human nature and system. And what makes them harder is how easily they become reinforced. Over time, we can start to believe that the loop is who we are. There could be self-talk in the tones of, I'm just an overthinker. I always ruminate. I'm just an anxious person. This is my anxious brain. For many of us, this message may not just be internal self-talk. It may be something that's handed to us again and again by the outside world. This is just how your brain works. This is just you. You always worry. You always stress. Labels can feel like verdicts. When you've been told long enough that your mind is different and will always be different, it is easy to believe that that loop is permanent and exactly who you are. But here's the truth. Different does not mean broken, and protective pattern does not mean a permanent pattern. A thought loop is not evidence of defectiveness. It is evidence of a system trying to protect us. The nervous system circles because it has not yet felt safe to release. And while our thresholds may be set differently by our histories, by our trauma, by the weight of our current life, none of that erases the fact that the mind and body are capable of learning new ways. Neuroplasticity is not a theory. It is evidence-based, and it is a lived reality. The nervous system circuits that are repeated grow stronger. And when we interrupt and replace them, new pathways grow too. And when the loop is loud, support matters too. It could simply be sitting with someone whose steady presence regulates us when our mind wants to spiral. It could be simply like stepping outside into sunlight and air so the body receives a different signal. It could be writing the loop down and putting it on a parking lot so the brain trusts that it will not be forgotten. It could be setting a timer to contain how long we give that loop attention before gently moving into something else. Using cues in our space. It could be a stone, it could be a photo, it could be a note that says pause as reminders is something that can be helpful in helping us shift. These are not crutches, they are support that helps us move into a different pattern. They hold us steady long enough for the new pattern to take root. And for those of us whose nervous systems have learned vigilance the hard way, loops may never vanish overnight. They may soften, they may shorten, they may lose intensity. Sometimes breaking the loop means not erasing it, but simply lowering its strength of hold on us. And for many of us, this is the work we do with the help of coaches like me, with therapists, with medication, with sensory support that gives the nervous system just enough stability to start on another path. And support is not separate from practice, it is part of the practice. So when we speak of loops, let us be very clear. This happens to everyone. The shapes are different, the thresholds are different, the content is different. And the labels we've been given absolutely reinforce them. But none of that make the loop a final verdict, because our presence of mind will support us in discerning what that verdict can be for our best interests. And it is also important to note that presence of mind is not about never looping again. It is about noticing the moment we are circling, reminding ourselves that we are not the loop, and gently interrupting it long enough to give our nervous system another experience. And with each interruption, even the smallest one, the pattern learns to shift. Our nervous system sees that there's a forward path other than circling. The question then becomes, when we're in the middle of a thought loop, how do we step out of it? What will help is to consistently remind ourselves that if we create enough of a pause, enough of a shift, that the loop will no longer own us. We are able to shorten it, we are able to soften it, and we will remind our system that another path exists. And this is where the blueprint of conscious leadership, the SIRE model, becomes practical. For example, let us imagine we notice ourselves replaying a conversation for the third, fourth, or fifth time. Our emotions and body indicates stress. Our thoughts circle back to the same line, the same what if. You noticing that, that is your self-awareness. We catch the loop instead of unconsciously just living inside of it. Self-awareness is not solving it or judging it. It is simply noticing it. And this is where the neuroscientific approach called affective labeling can support you to interrupt that loop. You accepting without judgment and calling out what has become part of your awareness now, which is, I am looping right now, and this will interrupt its hold. And from there, our self-inspiration gives us the next step. We remember why it matters to step out of the loop. We remember that looping does not give us a solution. It simply keeps us circling. We reconnect with what we truly value: clarity, movement, peace. That remembering is self-inspiration, the why that helps our nervous system lean forward and release instead of repeat. With the why we need to recenter solidly noted in our nervous system, we can now start the journey to regulation. We halt to check. Are we hesitating, avoiding, running on lack, carrying exhaustion? Recognizing the state gives us that doorway back. Then we rise. We recognize the loop, reset the intention, bring in our senses to ground us, and evaluate what's the next step right now. And then we shift. We stop that reflex. We highlight that one aligned step we've decided on, and we integrate what we know and we flow into action. And then we trust ourselves that this process may take time, but it's moving us out of a pattern that does not serve us. This rhythm is self-regulation, the practice of teaching our body and mind a new pattern when the old one just wants to spin away. And once we've recentered, we let it show up in what we say and do instead of feeding the loop with another hour of circling. We might speak to ourselves with kindness. That conversation is done for now. I choose to let it rest. Or we might take that one small aligned action, sending that email we've been rehearsing, or writing that worry down so the mind can stop carrying it. This is self-expression, putting steadiness into motion with clarity and respect, even when no one else is watching. And finally, we take a moment to look back. Did I notice the loop earlier this time? Did halt help me see what state I was in? Did one small step give me more peace than an hour of spinning? Reflection is not judgment, it is reinforcement. It tells our nervous system this interruption was safe, this interruption worked. That self-reflection, that quiet ecosystem that sustains change within us. When we look at it this way, SIRE is simply a way of moving that allows us to interrupt the loop, return to presence of mind, and gradually teach the body that safety can live outside of the circle. The loop may still rise tomorrow, and that's okay, because each time we interrupt, even briefly, we are loosening its hold. And the more often we walk this new pattern, the more our system will learn that release is possible, presence is safe, we don't have to circle forever. Breaking the loop in the moment is powerful, and the opportunity of it shows up in real spaces in our lives. It could be the meetings we walk into, it's the families we return to, it's the quiet hours where our mind does not let us rest. The loops we live are woven into our days, and that is why learning to interrupt them matters. At work, loops could show up after feedback. Instead of hearing it once, taking what applies and moving on, we replay every word. We analyze tone, timing, meaning. Hours later, nothing has changed except we are depleted. Our energy is gone. Breaking that loop does not mean ignoring feedback. It means noticing when reflection has tipped into rumination and choosing to act on what is applicable and what is useful instead of circling the feelings of what isn't. In our families, loops may show up in conflicts. It could be a disagreement, and it could have ended. But in our mind, that argument is still going on. We rehash what we should have said or brace for what might be said next. That loop keeps the tension alive, even when the moment is long gone. Breaking that loop might look like pausing and breathing, and then determining that choosing to reconnect is the next step, or establishing your boundaries is your next step instead of replay. And in our personal lives, loops show up so many times as worry. We run the same what if again and again. What if I fail? What if I disappoint? What is the worst that can happen? And what if that happens? The loop pretends to prepare us, but in reality, it is simply keeping us paralyzed. Breaking out of that loop is not about pretending risk does not exist. It is about remembering the smallest next true step for you, moving even gently instead of spinning in place. And when we interrupt these loops, whether it is work, family, or our inner world, we are not going into a space of no thought. We are reclaiming intentional thinking and we are reclaiming presence. We are telling our nervous system, this moment is not a threat. I can choose here. And over time, that steady choice rewrites the story the loop has been telling yourself and everyone around you. And now, as we close today, I would ask each of us to remind ourselves consistently that thought loops are part of being human. They can rise in the replay of a conversation, in the worry of what could go wrong, in the stories we carry about ourselves. For some of us, they come louder, shaped by our nervous system patterns or our histories. And for all of us, they come in ways that leave us spinning in place. And when we remove our learned and conditioned judgment of these patterns and reframe our perspective to work through it with compassion, we see they're not weakness or a sign of our brokenness. They are our nervous system's attempt to protect us. And with the work we put in towards integrating our mind to move through the world with presence, we are able to know when what feels protective is actually keeping us stuck. With that presence of mind and our support systems, we are able to break the loop. Awareness that names that loop, inspiration that reminds us why stepping out matters, regulation that steadies our body, expression that moves us forward with clarity and respect, and reflection that reinforces the shift. So here are a few reflections we can carry with us. When I notice myself circling, how quickly do I recognize it as a loop rather than a reflection? What does my body feel like when I'm caught in a loop? And how can I become aware of the state sooner each time? And what is one small true step I can take that reminds me I am not my loop, I can move? Breaking a thought loop is not about silencing that thought. It is about remembering that we can choose presence even when the mind wants to circle. And that presence does more than free us from looping. It creates space, space for clarity, space for movement, space for momentum. And that's where we'll go next in episode 32, Moments Make Momentum, exploring how even the smallest, present, intentional choices can create the motion forward that we are longing for. Thank you for joining me today. I am Gayatri, and I'm grateful for the time we've shared here. Until next time, let us keep strengthening our awareness. Let us keep choosing the steps that return us to presence, and let us keep trusting ourselves to interrupt our thought patterns when they keep us spinning in place.